But God's using a woman. Look at me, and I'll close it, I promise. God is using a female. Why? Because there's a seed inside of you that once you release it, however God wants to do that, whether it is through prayer, whether it's through your presence, like the lady I said showed up and said, I'm on assignment. Whether it is through that, whether you're in a schoolroom, in a classroom, whether you're wherever you are, whether you are at home with your children, and if you think, well, I'm just home with my kids, man, what else is better than influencing the next generation than you planting seeds in those kids that will come up other than what we're seeing come up today in some of the generation? I'm saying to you, hear me. From the very beginning, God looked at the woman and said, after she had messed up royally, and said, your seed. I thought I didn't know I thought I had the egg. No, your seed, what comes out of you will crush the head of this snake that has tried to destroy the world.
Encouraging People presents Harvest Time with Pastor Bill Baldwin.
And last night I had this weird thing. I was actually going to speak, kind of continue what I'd been talking about for a while. And I have these things once in a while. They're odd, and that's okay. If you're here first time, you say he's just weird anyway. I had this, I don't know what to call it, but a vision, but I had this picture to come to my mind. And in that, I saw, if you've ever seen any of the old World War II, of course I wasn't alive then, just want to let you know that. My dad was in World War II, but any of these old World War II poster-like things, and you saw the women wearing overalls and they were in the factories, they were basically doing what the men did when they were home, but the men were all fighting, and now they were doing all the stuff at home. I saw that in my mind, and I thought, well, there you go. What's that about? And then I realized today's Mother's Day, and I think, so this was last night. And when I say last night, I was going to bed. I was in the twilight zone. It was no getting up and writing anything down. It was just remember that when I get up. So I got up. And I realized, I felt like the Lord wanted to speak into women's lives and call that which is in you. I mean, for example, let's just get this. Let's go back to the poster thing and what I saw. This nation had no clue that it would be able to exist on the workforce of the women while the men were off overseas fighting. But we not only existed, it went off the charts. I mean, things just went crazy. And of course, I realized patriotic stuff there was a lot of motivation there and all of that. But the fact is, if the Lord used women, and I use that specifically because it wasn't just a national thing, it was a God thing. The Lord used women to do what, first of all, men didn't think they could do. Secondly, what some of them, probably most of them, didn't think they could do. And they kept the household going at the same time. So it was like crazy stuff. And we don't appreciate that. First of all, we didn't live during that time. And it took just the sight of a poster for me to realize, wow, women have, and I know it's Mother's Day, but I think the Lord wants to speak into the life of ladies. Women you have things that God's planted in you that I think the Lord wants me to just in a prophetic way, call it out of you. And to realize that there are things in you that you literally can do. And I'm not talking about just physically do, but actually call out of your world into those that are in your world, including your family, that if you just knew what you had. So, whether that makes any sense or not, maybe the rest of it will. So there you go. So I'm not just going to celebrate mothers today. I want to celebrate every female, as young as the female might be or as old. And I want to begin with I want to begin with the beginning because it was in Genesis chapter 3, if you remember, and we tend to make, or at least guys tend to make fun of this little passage, where Eve ate the fruit of the tree, ate the apple, we always say. We don't know if it was an apple, not what it was. But it goes like this. The Lord, of course, this is after the fall and after they had disobeyed the Lord, said, don't eat of that tree. You need all the trees, but not that one. And we know how that went. But listen to these words. Here it goes. It said that, this is Genesis chapter 3 and verse 12. Here it is. And the man said, this is a good one to start with, isn't it? The woman that you gave me, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me the fruit of the tree and I ate. Okay, we're not going to plan on that one right there this morning, so wouldn't dare touch that. But then it goes on, the next verse. And then the Lord God said to the woman, what is that you've done? And the woman said, the serpent deceived me and I ate. And we tend to look at that in like a down way, but I just love it that the woman, you women will be real and honest. I mean, you'll say, here's what it was. And the serpent deceived me and I ate. Now, she didn't tell all the story because Adam knew some things he didn't tell her, obviously, but that is it may. Verse 14, and then the Lord said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock, above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. Verse 15, but I'll put enmity, that is hostility, animosity, between you, he's speaking to the serpent still, the devil, and the woman, and between that's talking about the devil, his offspring, and her, the woman's offspring, and he shall crush your head, he meaning her offspring, and you shall bruise his heel. I want you to watch this one. The King James Version says it this way. This is the old King James Version that none of us hardly ever read anymore. Here's what it says here. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between, here it is, thy seed and her seed. Her seed, shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. It's an unusual thing. When I saw that the first time, it's been several years ago that I saw it. When I saw that the first time, the first thing that hit me was this thing, seed. I'm thinking, and the word literally means seed. It can also mean, if you dig into it, it also a few times is translated as offspring, but it literally means seed. And it could mean the seed of an apple tree or the seed of a man. But it's odd that it says this because it talks about the woman having a seed. I'm just going to let your minds go that just for a minute. The first prophecy in Scripture that we have is this one, and it mentions her offspring or her seed. Now, you know and I know that it is the man that's often seen as having the seed, is that the man plants the seed, the sperm, and the woman carries the egg. And when those two get together, we have fruitfulness. We have a child that's suddenly born. And my notes are stuck, and now they're not. Thank the Lord. So suddenly, all of a sudden, it's looking into this, and traditionally you got the male seed, which causes the female egg to become a baby. But God looks to this woman and says, your seed will actually grow up and crush the head of the snake or the serpent or the enemy, the devil. And we know that's a prophetic word that one day when Christ would be born, come into the world, that it was him, the seed, that crushed the head of the serpent. Enough on that one. There's a lot that can be said about it, but I just don't want to go any farther. But even after the fall, this Genesis 3 story says that the woman's seed, not the man's seed, but the woman's seed would crush the head of the serpent. Right now, he's not even talking to Adam. He's talking to this female that he made to be the helpmate of Adam. And he says to her, He says, you are going to bring forth a seed, and it is going to be so. In other words, the Lord looks at her immediately and calls out of her things. And you know she's sitting there looking. I don't think Eve has a clue. I don't think the rest of her life she probably didn't have a clue. She don't have a clue what it is, what he's talking about or anything. But she's getting ready. And even after the fall, God declared that the ultimate importance of the woman in the role, watch this, in the role of spiritual and in every kind of way, victory on the earth would be through her seed, which would have the power to crush the head of the enemy. I want to stop right there and just say that even in Eve's weakness, God said, I will literally use you to transform the whole earth. Now, I want to stop there because whether this gets you, when I get done with this and finished, if you say, well, I didn't, I couldn't, I don't care. I just want you to hear that God took a female and declared over a female who that we make jokes about that if it hadn't been for her, Adam wouldn't have. Or if Adam had told the whole family what had gone on, maybe she wouldn't have. But just leave that alone for a moment. But God actually looked into the female, into the life of the female, and said, I am going to place within you something that has the potential to crush the enemy that is in your sphere, that's going on, that's messing with your life. He didn't tell Adam that. Of course, Adam's got his role. All of us Adams have our role. We know that. But God would not, listen to this, God would not defeat the enemy of our soul, Satan, without using fallen human beings, but in particular, you women. I want to say that again, because I don't know if you're sitting there, you're just kind of looking at me like, well, there you go. God would not defeat the enemy of our soul, Satan, without using fallen human beings, but in particular, the woman. I'm thinking, this morning I was thinking of the sprinkling of names that came through the church, through the ages, through the modern times of women. And right now, it's so funny to me because I hear certain denominations, one in particular, but I won't go there, arguing about that. Women ought not preach in church, or they ought not, say anything. I mean, you can do a Sunday school and do the kids and all like that, but you better not get up and say anything. Now, if you believe that, carry on. That's okay. Just don't bury me because I don't believe it. And the reason I don't is this. It's because I've seen the fruit of when women under the influence of the Holy Spirit, how God has used them, not only in their own lives, but even in a whole nation. I mean, it's an off-the-chart thing. Now, this whole thing, that's where the story started. And we can go through the Old Testament, do all kinds of things. I won't pull out all those scriptures, mostly because I didn't have time to get all of them out from the time I saw my little picture in my head till today. But here we are. So let's get the ones I've got. So God decides, okay, we're going to end the old covenant and begin the new. So he shows up in Luke chapter 1. Zechariah is chosen by God by lot, by the priest. He's a Levitical priest. And by lot meaning they roll dice, not really dice, but you get the idea. In other words, he drew the short straw or the long straw, whichever one they used. And he was the priest for the time. While he was there serving the Lord in the temple, an angel shows up, Gabriel shows up, and says, well, I just want you to know that God has answered your prayer. You're going to have a son. And I'm thinking, this is an old man. This is an old prayer too. I mean, once you listen, I don't know how old he is, but I ain't praying for no baby. I mean, come on. And this old dude's about 90 or something like that, I think. Way up there in years. My point is that I'm thinking eventually you kind of lose faith for that kind of thing to happen. So But the prayer that he prayed back when he was young was still being held in the bowls of incense that's described in Revelation chapter 5. So it's like the angel filtered around and said, here's some. Let's go visit this guy. Who is that? That's Zach. Let's go down and see Zach. So he visited him and told him all these things. Well, he questioned the whole thing. And the question was not wanting to know, but the question was, I don't believe this. I can't believe this. So it's almost like the angel. Now, this is not in the Bible. This is Bill. But the angel's like, if I don't shut you up, you'll talk yourself out of this. So I'm just going to make you mute for a while. We used to call it dumb, but that wasn't, deaf and dumb. I'm going to stop you from talking. So he couldn't talk. And you remember that whole story. So he gets down, and Luke didn't tell us if Zechariah informed Elizabeth about this angel visiting him and what the angel said. But it does say this. This is Luke chapter 1, verse 23, 24. You ready for this? It says, and when the time of his service was ended, in other words, when his time of ministry as a priest had come to the close, he went home. And then it says, and after, parenthesis, he went home, these days his wife Elizabeth conceived. So lo and behold, he went home. And when he got home, been a long time since he'd been home. And he said, Libby, I'm home. And, well, you know it, a couple months later, she's pregnant. So notice how this Zechariah, he was a key player, but after he didn't believe the angel, suddenly, watch this, all the focus for the next couple of chapters, at least according to Luke, came on women. I don't mean men weren't important. So some of you guys say, you're just putting down men. We need men. I know we need men. We need men to do all this stuff, but it's Mama's Day, so listen to me. So thank you. So the rest of this thing, Luke chapter 2, same angel. He's not done visiting women. He shows up to a little old maiden called Mary. And when he comes together with Mary, it says, Luke chapter 1, verse 26, just these two verses, says, in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. And we know what happened after this one. So lo and behold, Genesis chapter 3, the seed, we're getting ready to see this boy. After all these years from the very beginning, we're getting ready to see the woman do something and birth something like has never been seen on the face of the earth before. And it didn't come to somebody who was old and mature and wise. It didn't come to somebody who was educated or any of that stuff. It came to somebody who was young, inexperienced, and was innocent and said, whatever you want, Lord, according to your word. That's what she said to the angel Gabriel. According to your word, let it be done unto me. And we've got something going on here, and we kind of mess it up. And it's okay to do the Christmas thing and the angels and the wise guys and all that stuff. That's all right, even though they were 2 years later, but whatever. It's okay to do all that. We don't want to stop doing that stuff, but we lose the power of it in our sentimentality and what we've done to what we call Christmas. We just lose the issue. And the issue there is that among all the things that he's done, don't forget, moms, ladies, females in the house, that there is something inside of you that God has created. We don't have. I'm just telling you, we don't have the thing, what God has put down inside of you, we do not have. It is so important that when the Apostle Paul, when he came along, and he was explaining, here's his Bethlehem story. This is Galatians chapter 4, verse 4. It said, God sent forth his son, and I love this, born of a woman. He put that in his text. Born of a woman to redeem those under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. You're no longer a slave, but now a son. He said, in the fullness of time, when the time became right, God sent forth his son, there's the seed, born of a woman. Hear me. This is not just a cute little story about a little innocent little maiden who was somewhere between 12 and 14 who was chosen by God because she hadn't grown up to doing bad stuff yet. She's innocent. She's pure. This is God declaring that in you women, there is something He has placed that actually can create a seed, plant a seed in a given area that can change that part of the world. And I love to see the fact that most of you men are looking because you need to, because if you're married, if your woman gets hold of this, you are in for a great surprise in all kinds of ways. Because it's powerful what God's put in her to be able to change your circumstances. And by that, I'm not throwing little spears at you like she's going to get you with this. Well, I don't mean that at all. Change your whole family circumstances. I think I think of this, I'm thinking, Satan sits women, mothers, potential mothers, in his sights before the men, because if he can take you out or deceive you, the rest of us are fried. I mean, it's true. Or if not that, the rest of us will never find our true potential, because much of it comes through what God's doing in you. And I think it's the reason so many ladies over the last at least 3 or 4 generations, you've been such a target by the enemy. And it's hit you in all kinds of ways. It's hit you in ways psychologically, emotionally, and usually in a family. It's not always so, but usually between a husband and wife, or a male and female, if it's not husband and wife, usually between a male and female, the more likely to go through emotional struggle. Doesn't mean it's the only one. I mean, I get this. Please, I'm not saying it's exclusive. But most of the time, it is the female that struggles with the emotional upheavals of chemical imbalance and all of that. Now, a guy can too, but most of the time, it's a woman, and it's a female. And here's what I want you to know: it's not just like, well, I guess that's just because of my, how we are and how I am, and la da da. And it goes on. I'm thinking this: we need to realize that you are so important to your world, so important to your kids, so important to your grandkids, so important to people in this. You don't even realize, even in this atmosphere of church right here, you think, nobody, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really make any difference. Do you realize how many people, how many other ladies, many times, it could be if they're younger guys, but most of the time it's like, you know how many young ladies are looking for other older ladies to be a spiritual mother to them? Now, that doesn't mean you can walk up and say, can I be your spiritual mother? I've actually had a guy to do that to me one time. He was older than me. He said, I would be honored to be your spiritual father. And I didn't want to embarrass him. I said, well, okay, if you want to adopt me, but it never was real. It was like we had a relationship, but it never kind of worked, because that's a spiritual thing that just comes forth, and you just kind of know it by hanging out. But there is such a need of that. Some of you are younger, and by younger, that doesn't mean you're just the teenage folks, but some of you are being prepared to be that. And don't take my words today and start measuring yourself and say, I should be doing better at this according to what he said. No, don't do that. I just want to call forth that which is in you that maybe you don't even realize how over the top important you are. What you've got inside of you, how God wants to use you, how He has targeted you to target someone. I mean, there is something inside of ladies that I know I don't have a handle on. my spiritual mother, she was here last Mother's Day. Remember her, Betty Goldman? Still alive, 91 years old and counting. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go see her today, but I'll at least call her after the service. I was thinking about this, when the whole thing about the picture of the World War II and then the scriptures, and I thought about Betty. And then I thought about Eddie. Eddie was her husband. And Eddie died when he was in his early 50s while he was in bed next to her. He had a heart disease. And he just died of a massive heart attack right there beside of her. He had gone through several heart attacks prior to that. But Eddie, he worked in Cannon Mills. He was a textile worker. How many around here remember Cannon Mills? Let me say, okay, so some of you remember Cannon Mills. That was the mill for this. We had one in Albemarle. I wasn't here then, but I lived in Kannapolis. So we had the Big Daddy Rabbit in Kannapolis. Over there was acres of mill, and I'm not exaggerating. I mean, it was all under roof. Eddie worked in Cannon Mills. Eddie, watch this. He could not read and he could not write. I literally have seen him. I saw him sign his name with an X. He could write Eddie, kind of, but he could not read and he could not write. Here's the other odd thing. Eddie, he dressed impeccably on Sunday. He was one of the ushers, always the usher, always welcoming you. And I mean, he had his cuffs. Mine's not the right length. His was always a white shirt, crisp white shirt, about a 1/4 inch out from under his cuff, right, just the way it should be. Always, and he'd always greet people with a smile. His cars were always clean. I mean, hubcaps. Do you remember what a hubcap was? The hubcaps were clean. Everything was clean. I mean, it was impeccable. He was amazing. And he couldn't read nor write. I'm thinking, how's he do that? And they always seemed to have. And they were just plain old everyday people. Now, Betty was a very deep woman of God. Eddie loved Jesus with his whole heart. But it was obvious Betty was light years spiritually beyond Eddie. But when I got around them, I began to see how they operated in life. She reached into Eddie, and all the things that he couldn't do, like read and write, instead of saying, you could learn to read and write if you'd go down here to Rowan Tech. That's what in the day, Rowan Technical School. If you go down there and learn, let them teach you, you can learn to read and write. I mean, she never heard that. In fact, she went the other direction. And she said, can you imagine what this man's able to do, and he can't even read and write? I would listen to her, and she reached into him, besides praying for him like she did. I told you about walking through her living room. Maybe I didn't tell you in her presence. Walked through her living room, and I always felt like, woo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. That was her prayer room. It's where she prayed. Well, I wasn't used to praying like that back in those days, and I'd walk through there, I just felt this, woo. I think, oh boy, okay, let's go to the kitchen. In Eddie, besides praying for him, she reached into him and actually, in this case, used the things that he was weakest at to actually highlight, look at what he can do, even though he can't do this. Eddie, working in Cannon Mills, went to Haiti numerous times and preached the gospel, went to Ecuador numerous times and preached the gospel. I don't know how many times he would come back from a trip and get up and give a testimony in church. We were in a Methodist church. I mean a real Methodist church. And Eddie would stand up in the middle of the service and say, preacher, I've just got a testimony. Here you got this guy that just welcomed you walking in the door with this beautiful, crisp suit and everything. He stands up now, got tears running down his eyes. Preacher, I just got something to say for Jesus, and I just feel like a preacher, you got to be a dummy not to let somebody like that talk. So he let him talk, let him give testimony. He was amazing. And a man who had a laborer's job in a local textile mill, and yet took the gospel to the nations. Why was that? Because he was a go-getter? No. Because he had a woman that looked into her man and was able, because she knew who she was. I don't think Betty in this world would have never dreamed what I'm talking about. If she were here this morning, she would say, I didn't feel like any of that. You don't have to feel like it to do it. You don't even have to know what you're doing to pull it off. She just knew God. And she reached into her man and pulled gold out of him that he in the natural did not have. I'm not saying this for you ladies who are wives in here today. If you don't do that, shame on you. That's not my point. My point is I want to talk to every female in the room. Married, unmarried, yet to be married, wish you weren't married, but you are, whatever. And tell you this is a God thing. This is not a personality thing. This is a God thing. That wherever and whoever you are, that there is a thing that God put into you where you're not just, watch this, you're not just a receiver of things. You are literally one by the Lord who actually can sow a seed that will reproduce, that will step on the head of the enemy that's with any eye shot of anywhere in your vicinity, that's messing with the stuff that you don't want him to mess with and the people that you don't want him to mess with. I am completely convinced of this. Is it going to happen overnight? Well, absolutely not. Especially if you're not at a place where you have, it's just, I see these people that, I think I mentioned this some years ago, Mother Teresa, this nun that she was called mothers. Nuns don't marry, obviously. And there was no natural motherhood, but she was a spiritual mother, and her influence went even beyond the Christian world, much less the Catholic world. She was a Catholic. But everybody embraced who she was. And then she died, and we found her journaling. And we found that she struggled. She struggled. I think I pulled out a quote I found that I pulled out some years ago. Mother Teresa, this is from Christianity Today, which was at least originally an evangelical publication, whatever now. But anyway, it was back years ago. Mother Teresa, it says, belongs to the whole world, not to the Roman Catholics or Christians only. Indeed, she is the first religious figure in history to be revered during her lifetime by adherents of all religions and Christians of all denominations. And when she died in 1997, there was this universal outpouring of heartfelt appreciation and reverence for her long life of service. Why was that? It's because here you've got this spiritual woman, even in the midst of her struggles. Just Google it. It even reveals some of the things she said in her personal diaries, which she struggled to know the love of God even. We would have never guessed that. She didn't let that be shown, which is the way many women like you're trained to do. You got to do a job, you got to do this, got to take care of the kids, got to do life. So you just don't reveal certain things and you carry on life. You can find women through the ages. I know we tend to platform guys, males, macho. We tend to do that. But behind the scenes, this nation and a people arose with these women who planted seeds of life wherever they were. Susan Anthony, she was a proponent of women's rights, but also of abolition of slavery. But you know what? She was a Quaker. And back in that day, that meant something. She spent hours and hours sitting in the presence of God. And she would not let them take her her ideal of women's rights and make it become a secular thing. She kept it within the framework of spiritual life under Christ. All these, Harriet Tubman, I mean, if you've never heard of that life, she was an African-American lady who, in this world, she was part of the Underground Railroad. She had a prophetic gift, and she knew it. She knew Jesus. She literally could see God would tell her where not to send people who were trying to escape the South, because the Lord would show her where they had set up stations to get those who were escaping. It goes on and on and on. You ever heard of the name David Yonggi Cho? Pastored the largest church in the world. He died a few years ago. Seoul, Korea. So the Lord gave him a plan. This was I don't know when this happened. He actually started the church a year or so before I was born. The church has now 700,000 members. I can't even imagine that. That's crazy. But anyway, it does. But when the Lord revealed a plan to him, what to do, he showed him house churches. I don't know actually he called them cell groups. But he showed him house churches all over Seoul. And he knew it was the Lord that gave him the plan. So he goes to his elders and deacons, I guess that's what he called his leadership guys, his men, and shared the plan with them. And they said, that won't work. We're not doing that. we don't want to do it. So you know what he did? He went to the women. When you're a little Eastern guy, you don't do that. Women walk so many steps behind the guy, and this is back in the day. They walk behind the guys, they walk behind their man, and you don't bring them out front. But he knew it was from God. So any woman who was willing, he put them over a cell group, house church, what we would call. He put them over it. Lo and behold, the thing began to thrive. Women began to win their communities and bring people to Christ that lived around them in their community. It was amazing. Eventually, the men had to become a part of it. But what happened was this, is that God spoke a word, and it was the women who grabbed it and used it as the seed of the Lord to make it happen. I mean, you realize that we can't even be what we're called to be without you? God looks at us and says, he makes Adam and looks down and says, oh, that's not good. He's alone. I'm serious. So we laugh about that stuff. But the Lord looks down at us and he says, all this other stuff, it seems to be right, but this is not good. I need to make King James help meet. When I first read that, I was in college when I got saved, and I was reading that, and I thought, help me. They've misprinted something there. That don't sound right. I'm serious. I didn't think it was right. He needs a helper. So he makes a woman. Jesus, you ready for this? You've got to grab this. Jesus is taking his world, and I'm not going to take time to read it because I want to spend plenty of time for the end. But Jesus is sharing the kingdom, the gospel of the kingdom with everyone. But lo and behold, we've got Brother Luke who lets us in on stuff. He always shares some details none of the other boys ever talked about. But Brother Luke, he let the cat out of the bag. In Luke chapter 8, verses 1, 2, and 3, you can go there and look at it. And lo and behold, Jesus and his boys, his men, his 12, they got this little group of women following them around. What are the women doing? The women taking care of them. The women are supplying for them. Listen to me. I agree that men have a leadership role that can't be fulfilled by a woman. I do agree. I also know this, just by history alone, if you don't do what you're called to do, then God will say, okay, Sally, we're going to use you. And God will put his hand, because he's already anointed her, he'll put his hand on a woman in such a way that he will let her carry a seed that will be planted and change her world. It's an amazing thing when you begin to think about it and see what God can do and what he wants to do through you gals. You're like these bridal warriors. Why is it that women are the ones that get the spirit of intercession and prayer on them so quickly? So much more quickly than men. Why is that? Quicker than I did. I mean, I went for years. I told you Betty Goldman, I would be with her, and it was just like woo-woo world. You know, I just didn't. I thought I didn't think it through, but I knew this: I'll never be like that. I will never be like that. I don't see myself becoming like that. Because there's something in here, whatever you got in the natural is a reflection of what God wants to do in you in the spiritual. There's this place where Jesus said, this is John chapter 16, says, when a female, happy Mother's Day, a woman is giving birth, she has sorrow because her hour has come. But when she has delivered the baby, that's the seed, into the world, she no longer remembers the anguish for the joy that a human being has been born into the world. There is something within women that will birth into families, that will birth. I was, should I say this? I am. That camera right there, you know. I need some bullets for that one too sometimes because you never know where it's going to. A precious lady that loves God so much, and she is a prophetic, she's first of all just prophetic, and then she is a prayer warrior that's been hired in the city in a certain department that I know of, and I'll just leave that. And it is so powerful to see her, and she's only been there just a short while, to see her coming to work, picking up stuff to pray for. She's already praying for this one and praying for that one. And I'm thinking, and I hadn't told her nothing. I have said nothing about people. And she's already zeroed in. She knows exactly. And I'm thinking, holy God, these folk in for something around here. I'm telling you right now. I know there are no guys there doing that. The maintenance boys ain't doing that. I'm telling you right now. They get in the prayers, but they're not putting them out. And there is something, and it's something how God, listen, and when I walked in and said, why did you come? Why here? Because she don't live anywhere near around here. I said, why here? She said, I'm on assignment. I said, holy God, come on now. I ain't never heard a man say that. A man says, I'm looking for a job, and I got hired. I saw this woman, she said, I'm on assignment. I'm thinking, my God, ain't that something? Look at me, ladies. Where you are, you have such a thing in you that God has put in you that nobody can deny. Nobody can deny that. I've seen it. I've seen it in the prayer gatherings here in years past. I've seen it in Sarah, Stacy, Gina, Ginger, Trish. I've seen it and then the more of you that will come. I have seen this thing in these women in this house. And there's more of you than there were then. That's got this thing down inside of you. Now, I want to say this and try to land this thing right here. Because there's also something in you. We kind of make, and again, I'm taking all these jokes, and I want to leverage these things because we joke about women talking. Y'all you want to do, just go on, jabber, jabber, jabber. And us guys, we go to the corner and don't shut up and don't say anything. Talk! Anyway. But let me take this another direction and say this. Why are you like you are? Because God has called your voice to be a prophetic voice that brings utterance, to bring that which is not into being, which is. Why is it that when the resurrected King, and I love it that these guys in certain streams of the Christian faith are arguing about, is it right for women to preach or not? But who did God set outside the tomb when the Lord had risen from the dead? Mary Magdalene and the other women. They sat outside. They run. They more than that, they rushed. They ran. Again, Mr. Luke. He tells us that Mary Magdalene goes to the disciples and says, they have risen from the dead. And what did the boys say? Ain't so. I'm serious. They did not believe it. I've got it down right here. Luke 24:10. Now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna. You remember Joanna, don't you? I just saw the name. I didn't remember Joanna. And Mary, the mother of James, and the other women we don't even know the name, with him, who told these things to the disciples, that he was risen from the dead. But these words seemed to them, who? The boys, the disciples, an idle tale, and they did not believe them. It sounds like a woman to me. I want to declare to you ladies this morning, hear me. Plant your words like seeds, because God has given you a seed. You are not just a receiver where you sit over and receive a seed. You are, according to the Lord in Genesis 3, you declare seeds. Plant your words as seeds. Your life is a seed. You are a seed. Just want to name some names. Okay. Phoebe, she's called a deaconess in the New Testament. Priscilla, a tent maker that accompanied Paul. Lydia, a successful businesswoman who was the first documented Christian in the Europe area, in the area of Europe. Philip's daughters, what were they? Does anybody know? Say it out loud. They were prophets, prophetesses. Junia. You know what? Do you know who Junia was? Junia is a female name. The name itself in the Greek text, Junia is a female name. Don't name your boy Sue, in other words. Junia is a female name. In Acts chapter 16, it talks about Junia as one of the apostles. Not the 12, but having an apostolic role in the church. I know that messes some of you up, like, well, but what I think is that God had his hand on a woman, and there probably was no one else, at least on her level, and he said, I'll use it. The first time that God ever threw prayer in my direction, it was a lady named Sue Curran. She was the pastor of a church in Blunttville, Tennessee, right outside Kingsport, the Tri-Cities area there. Blunttville was in the middle of nowhere, sort of like Frog Pond or Finger is around here. Church had 160 acres of land, and the Lord showed her where to go get the land when the church was just barely started. And she walked and walked in front of the bulldozer, and she said, just follow me. And while she was walking through the bulldozer, this is her story, the bulldozer was following her into this 160 acres of wilderness until they got to the place where they wanted to build the church, the building itself. By the time I got there, they had a revival to break out in the church in 1980. Church was not a big church, about 300 people. They had a prayer meeting every Tuesday night. I went every Tuesday night. For about 5 or 6 weeks, I went every Tuesday night. Just bring an old prayer meeting. About 300 people in church. You know how many people they had come to prayer meeting? 300. They'd take their kids and they'd get their kids, put the pajamas on their kids, and they'd stick them under the pew and say, you can go sleep right there. And some of them be working, nursing the children. They put those to the side. And I learned in that atmosphere, I listened to every cassette tape that woman ever talked about when it came to prayer or the presence of God. I was literally under her tutelage, and I got to know her, and we did have conversations several times, but under her tutelage, I learned the atmosphere of prayer. I've recently heard, my background's Methodist, and it's a sad thing that the Methodists split, but not a sad thing. And I'll just leave that right there. But the new denomination's called Global Methodist. Well, when I went to Asbury to the revival that took place last year, February, I went there and I ran into this spirit-filled bunch of Methodists. I mean, they're everywhere. God's got his people everywhere. I got to know through those people, I got to know a lady by the name of Carolyn Moore. Carolyn Moore, I'm guessing, you don't dare guess old lady's age, but she's not here, so maybe middle 50s, I don't know. But her and her husband planted this Methodist church called Mosaic Methodist Church. And she was a Mosaic before the fancy Mosaic, wherever it's at. I know there's a Mosaic. Anyway. A powerful, spirit-filled congregation. It was United Methodist. Now it's Global Methodist. I listened to her, and I thought, holy God, here's a woman. She's the lead pastor. Her and her husband planted this church. He's a school teacher, planted this church in 2003. It is amazing to see this one. I mean, and I love it when a lady keeps her ladiness, and she's the leader. She actually wrote a book called Women Who Lead, so go buy it. I'm sure to be good. I've got some of her other stuff that she wrote. And it's not a huge church, maybe twice our size, but God's using a woman. Look at me, and I'll close it, I promise. God is using a female. Why? Because there's a seed inside of you that once you release it, however God wants to do that, whether it is through prayer, whether it's through your presence, like the lady I said showed up and said, I'm on assignment. Whether it is through that, whether you're in a schoolroom, in a classroom, whether you're wherever you are, whether you are at home with your children, and if you think, well, I'm just home with my kids, man, what else is better than influencing the next generation than you planting seeds in those kids that will come up other than what we're seeing come up today in some of the generation? I'm saying to you, hear me. From the very beginning, God looked at the woman and said, after she had messed up royally, and said, your seed. I thought I didn't know I thought I had the egg. No, your seed. What comes out of you will crush the head of this snake that has tried to destroy the world. That's how big you women are. So, what's the response of that? It is, you hear the word of the Lord, you hear the move of the Lord in your heart, and you obey it. God could call you ladies right now, could be speaking something to you to move and learn prayer like you've never known it before. You actually have an intimacy in that us guys have to learn in a whole different realm. Do it. The church will not grow up and be the church until women realize who God has made them, snucker into their place and say, I ain't moving. And you can even do like Miss Betty did and take the very things that seem to be the very detriments of her man, platform them and say, can you imagine, even though he's not good at this, look what he does. Because you can call the gold out of a person that way. And this morning, in you ladies, I'm calling the gold out of you. I'm saying to you, you've got a prophetic voice, whether it's a prayer voice or a voice to be heard. You've got a prophetic voice. Don't sit on the sidelines. Do what God's told you to do, please. Please do. As Trish last week, when you came and gave your testimony, I went home thinking, Dawn's testimony was great, Joe's was great. I was so glad that the Lord used both of those in such a great way. But when I saw you come, I thought, she's one. Because I just felt like somebody's supposed to give a testimony. And when I saw you come, she's the one. Why? Because when you said what you said, it wasn't that you just got it off your chest and God was that you did, and God was able to do something in you in a greater measure. You did, and that is true. But more than that, when you said that, you planted a seed. Because it's not that everybody has the same problem, not that every woman necessarily, but there are people who have a problem, and when you declare testimony, it becomes a prophetic utterance to the whole people. Well, if God can do that in her, He can do it in me. If He can set her free, He can set me free. So suddenly, your testimony becomes their prophetic word for the moment, that God's going to do something in me because He did it in Trish. Do you see how that works? That's the reason testimonies are so key. Father, come right now on this Mother's Day through the power of your Holy Spirit upon these precious young ladies, all that you've gathered in your female world right here today in this church. I pray right now that every knocking on the heart's door that's going on right now, that there will be a raising of the flag of surrender. I just surrender to it. That you will do something in such a way, in such a measure, that is more than we would ever ask or think. Father, I pray right now, I speak to every lady in here, everything, maybe things in your home that is, you're thinking, this is going to sink us. Why don't you back up and ask, God, give me a perspective of this rather than failure, rather than a detriment. Show me what I can do. It's not all on you, by no means. And don't any man in here take this message and go back to any of to your spouse and say, do you hear what he said? Now get busy. Shame on you if you do that. But you ladies, back off and look and realize there is something in you. If Eve, in her weakest moment, would be declared as the one who would step on the head of a serpent, then what can you do under the leadership of the power of God, the power of the Holy Spirit? So I declare right now, Father, for every Mary, for every Joanna, for every Mary Magdalene that sits outside of a tomb, and they, even if it's in the spirit, see a resurrection of a life, of a marriage, of a kid, of a child, of a teenager, of a church, of a group, of another family. They see a resurrection. If you will bring somebody from Charlotte and assign them to a job and realize that their assignment is to resurrect something in a local district that they don't even live in, you will take a lady full of God, wanting and desiring to walk with you to change the atmosphere of a home, of a classroom, of a community, of a grandchild. So I stand today. I want to be your mouthpiece and just say, I bless them and I thank you so much. I probably wouldn't even be still talking here today if it hadn't been some of them to speak life over me. Matter of fact, I know I wouldn't. So I thank you, and I pray right now that the power of the Holy Spirit, as we receive this body and your blood, that the power of the Spirit of God will especially come upon your women today. I pray right now in the name of Jesus, every woman that has battled depression, that has battled anxiety, these things that literally have been spoken over women even more than men, in the name of the Lord, no guilt whatsoever. But in the name of the Lord, I declare over you that there is a freedom in Christ Jesus, and I put the seed of healing in your mind, in your heart, in your whole in your chemistry, your chemicals of your body. I declare life over you right now and freedom completely from it. I declare right now over every woman in here for a vital hunger for Jesus like they have never ever experienced in their whole life. a hunger for more of you like they've never known, that they would be so eat up with a hunger for you that they would lead the men that are part of their life into that very same realm. Thank you. Now, Father, I'm asking you to bless these gifts of bread and the fruit of the vine. Let this bread, while we receive it, become your body, and this fruit of the vine become your blood for us today. We receive it and thank you for it. In Jesus' name.
This has been Harvest Time with Pastor Bill Baldwin, brought to you by Encouraging People. For more videos and resources like this, please subscribe to this channel and go to our website at encouragingpeople.com.